Has justice been served in the assassination of Rafik Hariri? A member of Hezbollah is found guilty of the massive bomb blast in Beirut 15 years ago. How will the murder verdict of Lebanon's former Prime Minister be received when tension there is already high? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Hashem, Ahelbarra. It was a long-awaited verdict after an investigation which has cost hundreds of millions of dollars. 15 years after the assassination of Rafik Hariri, the UN-backed International Tribunal in The Hague convicted Salim Ayyash, a member of Hezbollah. 3 other defendants belonging to the armed group were acquitted of killing Lebanon's former prime minister. All 4 were tried in their absence. Hezbollah denies any involvement in the massive bomb blast in Beirut, which killed 21 other people. Judges said Hezbollah and Syrian leadership ally may have had motives to eliminate Hariri, but they lacked direct evidence implicating them in the crime. The verdict's expected to influence Lebanese politics and widen sectarian divisions. We'll discuss that shortly. First, Zaina Khouri reports from Lebanon's capital.
The Special Tribunal for Lebanon reached its verdict in the trial of 4 Hezbollah members charged with conspiracy to kill former Prime Minister Rafik Hariri and 21 others. Salim Ayyash was found guilty. The 3 others were acquitted because the circumstantial evidence was not strong enough to prove their guilt beyond reasonable doubt. Prosecutors have based their case on evidence of a phone network that monitored Hariri months before his death that went silent following his murder. Hariri's son, Saad, himself a former prime minister, was in the court in The Hague for the judgment. He welcomed the verdict, vowing not to rest until punishment was served and calling on Hezbollah to cooperate.
In the name of the leader's family, the martyr Rafik Hariri, and in the name of all the families of martyrs and victims, we accept the court's ruling and wish for justice to be served. To be clear, we are not giving up our blood right.
Judges did say there wasn't enough evidence to prove direct involvement by Hezbollah's leadership or the Syrian government, which was in control of Lebanon at the time of the murder. They did note Ayyash's affiliation to the group and his communication with Mustafa Badreddin, a known Hezbollah commander who died in mysterious circumstances in Syria in 2016.
It's going to be very difficult for a lot of people to believe that Mustafa Badreddin, who was a high-level operative in Hezbollah, would have carried out such an intricate and politically sensitive assassination without any kind of green light from his leadership or from the Syrian regime, for that matter.
Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah has long denied any role in the massive bomb blast in Beirut 15 years ago. It's not clear how he will respond to Saad Hariri's call to cooperate, but Nasrallah has repeatedly vowed never to hand over the suspects.
We don't feel concerned by the tribunal's decisions. For us, it will be as if no decision was ever announced. If our brothers are unjustly sentenced, as we expect, we will maintain their innocence.
The former prime minister's killing tore Lebanon's society apart. He was considered the leader of the Muslim Sunni community, whose assassin belongs to a Shiite group. The verdict is unlikely to heal divisions.
There's been political instability since Hariri's killing. It was also followed by a series of assassinations that targeted anti-Syrian government figures in the country. Since then, the political landscape changed. The balance of power favors Hezbollah and its allies, which control political and military power.
But some see an opportunity to solve the latest political crisis.
Saad Hariri called on Hezbollah to sacrifice the same way he and his group sacrificed, and this somehow opens the doors for settling political issues.
The court, which can only accuse individuals, didn't tie Hezbollah's leadership to the murder, but it indirectly implicated it, leading many to believe the verdict could either set the stage for further instability or end years of confrontation that followed the assassination. Zana Khouri, Al Jazeera, Beirut.
Let's listen to how some of the Lebanese people reacted to the verdict.
My opinion is just like what Saad Hariri said. It's politically known who did it. We've wanted an international tribunal since 2005, and now it's given its ruling. We'll go with the verdict. But the real judgment isn't here. Judgment is with the Almighty. You won't find it on earth.
It's all worthless. They've been investigating for 15 years. They provide evidence, but it's never 100% decisive proof. They've just been taking money for nothing during all these years, just to create another civil war in Lebanon. No more, no less. All of the names have already been tied to Hezbollah. Tomorrow I think there will be a sectarian civil war here.
As you can see, they don't want to cause discourse and argue more. People on the streets can't take it much more. I mean, what are they supposed to say? It's clear who is behind the killing, and the story is clear. The tribunal has given its verdict.
Let's bring in our guests in Beirut. Rami Khouri, Senior Public Policy Fellow and Professor of Journalism at the American University in Beirut. In Washington, D.C., Firas Maksad, Adjunct Professor at George Washington University. Also in Beirut, Ilyas Hanna, a retired general in the Lebanon's army. Warm welcome to you all. Rami, the first reaction among many Lebanese across the political spectrum was basically, it took us all these years, an army of investigators, lawyers, experts, jurists, to say that Salim Ayyash is to blame, but not being able to connect the dots?
That and not being able to bring him into court. There's many dimensions of the decision that was unsatisfying to most people. The interesting thing about it is that pro-Hezbollah people had something they liked, anti-Hezbollah people had something they liked, but most people, I think, gave it a shrug of the shoulders. They don't think that it was an instrument for ending impunity. And they are wondering whether an international investigation of the port explosion is going to be, will meet a similar fate. So many different dimensions to this, but in the totality, I found it rather a low-key process.
Mm-hmm. Firas, the tribunal is not mandated in a way to indict political groups. I mean, however, the general sentiment among many people is that this is not what we were expecting them to do after all these years.
You know, I think Rami's right. Expectations were high on either side of the political divide in Lebanon. You know, the pro-Hezbollah side is unsatisfied with the verdict because a member of Hezbollah, a military commander belonging to Hezbollah, was in fact found guilty beyond reasonable doubt. But at the same time, the anti-Hezbollah camp in Lebanon was not satisfied that the court did not directly point fingers or connect the dots to the organization or to the Syrian regime. It did, however, paint the political context, the broader context in which this assassination took place, and did mention that Hariri had taken a position against the Syrian regime and one that was also not in favor of Hezbollah. But yes, I think the court came across as technical, as legal, as nuanced, and I think that plays in its favor rather than you know, what it had been accused of since its formation, which is being a political tool of the West, the imperialist, the Zionist camp, and so on and so forth.
Ilyas, the reason why many people in Lebanon in particular were baffled by the verdict is that basically they say that if Salim Ayyash was to be found by the tribunal as involved in the killing of Rafik Hariri, this was an operation that required massive logistics, intelligence, and it couldn't ultimately boil down to one person. So there are loads of issues which are missing in this whole verdict.
I know, because the lack of evidence was not really enabling this tribunal to connect the dots, because when you talk about a VIP personality in Lebanon that may really change the face of Lebanon, because post-assassination, the face of Lebanon, the bandwagoning, the political decisions in Lebanon have really changed Lebanon really changed after the assassination, to take one person and make him responsible to kill this VIP, highly guarded with the newest technology, and moreover, to connect and, provide issues and give orders and monitor his, whereabouts of Prime Minister Hariri, and then take like 2 tons of TNT that needs high expert to really, make them as a bomb, and bring the Mitsubishi that was stolen in Japan. So it's a highly complicated scheme, a highly complicated plot or operation. The indictment or the verdict came so tiny, little issue vis-a-vis this big picture of really killing Prime Minister Hariri.
All right.
Because Prime Minister Hariri was killed in a political context, political situation, and he was killed as a geopolitical struggle, the beginning of the geopolitical struggle in the region between Iran and, the Arab Gulf, and the United States of America. We cannot really take it so easily. The tribunal, the post-verdict, it's an open book.
Okay. Rami, how do you read into the wording of the verdict itself? For example, that famous paragraph about not indicting Lebanon and Syria, but saying that the political environment that existed, it paved the way for Hezbollah and Syria to have motives to eliminate Hariri.
That's kind of peculiar, because I don't know if that was in the sort of legal mandate of I'm not a lawyer, but they're supposed to find who killed Hariri and the other people, many other people who died, using the evidence that was available. And it's interesting that they said that Syria and Hezbollah, there's no evidence for them, but they're kind of interested. That's a slightly extra legalistic kind of comment. But I think it's because in Lebanon, this was a political trial. In The Hague, this was a judicial trial. In The Hague, they judged evidence. In Lebanon, most people judge political positions. But because this happened 15 years ago, it's lost a lot of its sting that it had for many years. And the other important thing is the Hariri assassination, which led to the withdrawal of the Syrians following a big uprising in Lebanon, and then allowed Hezbollah to expand its power and take over from the Syrians and being the behind-the-scenes power in Lebanon that helps create or break governments. Lebanon is completely different today than it was back then, and there's so many new problems people are suffering from and trying to deal with that, in a way, these little elements in the judicial decision are intriguing, but not particularly important for most people, I would say.
All right. Now, Firas, when you look at the wording of the statement, you get the impression that the judges were somehow trying to be very careful, as if they were tiptoeing on a minefield. Now, after the verdict, where does it leave Lebanon?
Yeah, I think, again, the political landscape in Lebanon has shifted significantly in the 15 years since the assassination of Prime Minister Rafik Hariri. People are more concerned with their livelihoods today. Lebanon is in the midst of the deepest financial crisis it's ever faced, $92 billion in debt. It does not have a government. Its government collapsed recently because under the pressure of street protests and the Beirut blast in the port that destroyed almost half the city. So yeah, I do think that the reality on the ground has shifted, but I do see this as a positive rather than the negative, because it allows the court, which might have been tiptoeing around the verdict and very careful about its wording, in fear of the political consequences, it allows the court to be seen more as a tool of justice and legality rather than a political instrument. And I think that's a net positive. Lebanon needs to move forward. Lebanon needs to try and put together a government that is more representative of the needs of its people today. in order to be able to negotiate with the international community the support that it needs to get up and running again.
Okay. Ilyas, is this verdict likely to shape the future relationship between Hezbollah, between Saad Hariri and Hassan Nasrallah? How do you see them operating together in the future?
I think politically, Saad al-Hariri accepted the verdict, but I don't think that there is some harmony for the future. I don't think that the Sunni in Lebanon will accept what really happened for Rafik al-Hariri, as well as what's happening today. And the verdict and the assassination is one tiny little problem in the bigger picture. If you add the political problem, economic problem, and who is going in Lebanon to really approach, Saad al-Hariri to Hezbollah? We don't have this personality that is really accepted by everybody. Even the president of Lebanon is not really able to really reconstruct Lebanon on the assassination, the verdict, as well as the explosion in Beirut. We are in this array, I say. So after 37 years of Hezbollah trying to put all foreign powers, the Western power, the Arab power, out of Lebanon, all of a sudden, after Beirut explosion, everybody came back to Lebanon. You add the verdict today, and you have different formula.
Okay.
So complicated that nobody is able to really reconnect the dot between the Lebanese on the confessional, especially confessional perspective or side.
Rami, it was quite interesting, the statement of Saad al-Hariri, who said that he was willing to move forward, but at the same time he was expecting Hezbollah to reciprocate, particularly when it comes to handing over Salim Ayyash to the authorities in Lebanon for further investigation. Is this something which is likely to heal the wounds between the two, Hassan Nasrallah and Saad al-Hariri, or do you think it will further deepen the divide between the Sunnis and the Shias in Lebanon?
I'm not so sure if it'll impact all Sunnis and Shiites, but certainly between Hassan Nasrallah and Saad Hariri, it's going to end up being a little bit of both sides and end up being neutral. This is the problem in Lebanon, that the Lebanese political elite have to satisfy so many parties to be able to reach any decision, big or small. And they have this tradition of no victor, no vanquished, as the way they reach decisions. But that's a fool's errand. No victor, no vanquished has left you with no political class, almost no country, no economy, no currency, no jobs, no electricity, and no many other things besides no victor, no vanquished. So the population of Lebanon is fed up with this system. It's completely rebelling against it, wants all of these people out, including Nasrallah and Hariri and Aoun and everybody. So the relationship between Hariri and Nasrallah, which would have been an important one 10 years ago, is far less significant today. Hezbollah is really the only major power in the country, and the counterforce is the rebelling citizenry. The millions of people who are supporting the uprising. How those two engage with each other, I think, is the ultimate determinant of where Lebanon is going to move ahead. And they don't have a lot of time to make that decision because the country is collapsing economically.
Firas, this has come at a very critical moment for the Lebanese people, an unprecedented political impasse, an unprecedented economic crisis. But ultimately, political leaders will have to sit down and see all the options. One of the options is a national unity government. The concern is that if there is no agreement, it could be just a descent into anarchy and chaos. Where do you see the Lebanese heading forward?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily optimistic about what a national unity government can be able to deliver for the Lebanese. As you know, in the Lebanese political lexicon, a national unity government means getting Hassan Nasrallah's Hezbollah and Hariri and all the various political leaders in the country represented in one government, and that's generally a formula for a lack of progress because they tend not to agree on things. Instead, I think we need to look at things differently. I think we are, this is Lebanon's centennial. Come September 1st, we will mark 100 years since the creation of Greater Lebanon in 1920. It is a pivotal moment coming on the heels of the Beirut blast. Really, the people of Lebanon have had enough. They've been in the streets since last October. And now we have a regional and international involvement. The French, in particular, with President Macron, have taken the lead. And President Macron enjoys good relations with the various communities in the country, but also the various regional and international players. He's able to get the attention of President Trump in the US. He also has relations into Tehran and spoke to President Rouhani. So this is really a moment where there's an opportunity, no matter how small, for the French and others to weave together a new regional and local understanding that can move Lebanon forward. I don't think a unity government will cut it anymore.
Ilyas, Firas and Rami spoke about the new movement of the Lebanese who are saying that we're fed up with a political establishment that has been disconnected from reality. Do you think that this verdict will pave the way for the independent Lebanese people to move forward, build up a coalition that could take over in the future?
I think to change in Lebanon politically, it's like a process, you know. I mean, these guys that are really the culprit for the Lebanese situation today, these big problems in Lebanon, are the one that really in the, you know, in the government and the parliament. So if you want to change, you need a process, and the process needs electoral law, and this electoral law, who's going to really make an electoral law? They are the majority, and I think that I'm so pessimistic about the situation in Lebanon because it's now becoming between Iran, Hezbollah, who really controls the political scene in Lebanon, and the coming West. I mean, who controls the ground, control politics. Hezbollah controls the ground, so he controls politics. Why he has to give? The strongest give nothing, and the weakest has nothing to give.
Rami, we used to talk for many years about Lebanon. Each time it's the same DNA, a country divided along sectarian, political, ethnic, regional lines. That definition of Lebanon, do you find it now obsolete?
I think so, and I think many Lebanese do. They want a secular, democratic state that is truly built on the consent of the governed. The discussion we're having has highlighted the external actors, and everything that was said is correct. And what it tells us is Lebanon has essentially lost its sovereignty. Its fundamental decision-making is not in the hands of Lebanese. It's in the hands of French, Iranian, Saudis, Americans, other people around who try to have an influence. The Turks are looking for a role. The Israelis try to do stuff behind the scenes. And you've got a citizenry that has completely given up on its political leadership. And you've got a political leadership, a political elite that has completely forgotten about its citizens, not just in the last few months, but in the last 15 years. So this is a very, very fragmented, ravaged, damaged country that is not acting as a unified political entity. And this has to be fixed, and it can only be fixed by the Lebanese people.
Firas, very briefly, each time there was an incident, an event in Lebanon, we used to say, let's wait and see what will be the reaction of the Iranians and the Saudis, because they were the ones with massive political weight in Lebanon. That notion, is it still relevant in Lebanon?
I think it very much is, if we're sort of to paint the bigger picture here. The Middle East today falls into or is divided amongst three camps. You have certainly the Iranian camp and its allies represented by Hezbollah and Lebanon. You certainly have the Saudi-led Arab Gulf camp. And then you have the Turkey and Qatar camp. And Lebanon is disputed territory. So Lebanon will continue to be a turbulent place. Now, you've got to add on top of that the fact that you have this unprecedented financial crisis that the country is facing, and I think that there will be further pressure coming from the streets of Beirut against the political establishment, which Hezbollah is, of course, party to, unless we're able to weave together some kind of new regional understanding, not too different from the Taif Accords that ended the civil war in 1990.
Gentlemen, unfortunately, we have to leave it there, but I promise you we will continue to revisit the issue of Lebanon. Rami Khouri, Firas Maksad, and Ilyas Hanna, I appreciate your insight. Thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hashem Ahelbarra, and the entire team here in Doha. Bye for now.